Okay, so let me go ahead and share my screen. And I have an example up here of what unit testing looks like. So um, basically, there's a unit test package with a class called TestCase, and you make a subclass of that class for your unit tests. So for example, we start with a user class. Let me go ahead and pull up somebody else's code. I'm going to go ahead and let's see, what do I have here that I'll go ahead and pull up this schedule project here. And so this is kind of an elaborate project, but what we're going to do is I'm going to go to the logic package, and this particular application has separate classes for courses, instructors, schedules, and sections. So the requirements for generating unit tests are pretty minimal. You basically have to create one test class with a minimum of 5 unit tests in it. So I'm going to pick something that's fairly simple. I'm just going to do the course class here. So the course class is a data class that includes for each course a prefix, number, title, credits, and then some additional stuff. But the main stuff in the constructor is prefix, number, title, and credits. And if I want to make unit tests for this class, I can go ahead and create a new Python file called test course. And then I'm going to create a class test course that inherits from unittest.TestCase. Okay, and then that imports unit test. And then once you've created a subclass, you have some assert methods that are available. So, for example, here's a method for testing the constructor, and it's just called test constructor. It uses the setup method of the class to, if you need to make any objects or create any state, connect to the database, whatever you need to do before you can run this test, you do that in the setup method, and then you can call the assert method on the object and test for various things. So there's a bunch of different assert methods. So we'll take a look at a few of those. And this one to test the constructor, what it's doing in the setup method is basically it's making an object and initializing the properties of the object. So in the actual test itself, it's calling accessor methods on the object that it made and comparing them to the values that we expect to see. So we're going to do something similar here for the course class. So we're going to do a test constructor method. And I'm using lower snake case for this, but and then it doesn't have any additional arguments. What I'm going to do is I call self.assert equal. And if you type the assert, you see all the different choices you have. So you can compare whether two values are the same. You can check to see whether a value is in a list of values, whether it's a subclass of a class. There's near comparisons and lots testing whether something's false, whether something's true, greater than, less than, is not, lots and lots of different kinds of assertions. But they all behave pretty much the same, just with slightly different variations of the test. So in this case, I'm going to do assert equal, and then I need an example object. So I'm going to call the constructor for my course. So from course, import course. And then the constructor for a course is going to take some properties. So we're going to make a new test course is equal to a new course. And then I need to pass in a prefix. So we'll do CIS and a number 234A. And then the title is Real World Programming. And that's a 4 credit hour course. So after I've called that constructor, I should be able to call various methods on the test course object, like testcourse.getPrefix. And that should be equal to the value CIS. So I'm going to go ahead and test this. Now, when you write a test class in PyCharm, you get these little run arrows next to your test methods. So this one next to the class will cause it to run all the unit tests inside the class. And this one next to the test method will just run this one test case. So I'm going to run the test case by clicking on the plus, and I'm going to go and run it. And it passed. So it basically ran one test in 0.008 seconds. It was okay, which means that this thing matched that. So let me go ahead and add another test to another assertion to the same test. So this time I'm going to test that the test course get number is equal to CIS 133Y. Actually, this is just 133Y. There we go. So I expect that this is actually going to fail because the correct value is 234A. So let's see what happens when I run this test case. And in fact, it ran one test case, I got a failure, and it's telling me specifically what didn't work. So this assert equal failed because I expected the value 234A, but I actually got the value 133Y. So in fact, I got these backwards. Let me fix that. So that should be the expected value. Like so, actually, yeah. So let me try running it now. Yeah, good. Okay, so the expected value was 133Y. The actual value that this returned was 234A, and so it failed the unit test. And then I'm going to go ahead and fix this. So this is going to be 234A, and then I'm going to toss in an assertion for the name, which is Real World Programming. Test course get name, actually get title, and assert equal 4 is test course dot get credits. All right, so it should pass all those tests. Let's see if it does. And that's one test. So, and then to completely test the logic class, I could test the setters as well. So for example, let's test the prefix setter. Do I actually have a prefix setter? Let me check. Let me see what I have here. Basically, you would write test methods for each of these methods. So let's do the toDict method. So the toDict method is going to look pretty similar to what I have for the test constructor. So I'm going to test toDict, and I'm going to go ahead and call the same constructor as I was calling before, but this time I'm going to assert equal a dictionary that's going to include prefix. Actually, let me look at the dictionary here. Hang on. I'm going to copy this thing here. Save myself a little work. So this is the expected value. And I expect that the ID actually, let me get the method here. Hang on. It's the key value, which is this thing here. And then self.prefix is CIS, and self.number.upper is 234A. So the whole key is this thing here. Okay, so that's what I expect for the key. And then prefix, CIS, number, 234A, title, real world programming, and credits is 4. So I expect that value to be returned from testcourse.toDict. So let's see if my unit test works correctly. And it did. So that's 2 out of the 5 unit tests that I need to meet the requirements for the lab. I could test some of these getters, like compare the value of the get, but I already did that in the constructor, so you see how that goes. There's something for setting credits that I could test. This highlight function checks a value. I could test that to make sure that it's returning the right values with the right inputs and so on. So
So
once again, you only
you
need
want
5. Go ahead.
5 separate tests, not 5 assertions.
Right, that's correct. 5 separate tests, not 5 assertions.
Copy that.
Yeah. Any other? And there's some other stuff in the chat. Let's see. Yep. Thank you, Eric. Eric posted a link to the documentation for the unit test class, unit test module, I guess. Any other questions? So let me just actually show you one thing. So like I said, you can click this main thing to run all the tests inside of this test class. So that ran both tests. And you can also right click on a project folder and I thought it had run unit tests in here somewhere, but apparently not. Maybe I have to go here and do that. Yeah, so you can run tests in the logic class, and that will work as well. So any questions on writing unit tests in Python?
I didn't see anything about like assertion requirements. We don't, is there like a minimum you want on each test?
No, you should cover the tests pretty reasonably though. So um,
Not that hard to sort of write something for all of the functions that you wrote, at least to meet the requirements. So
yeah,
sounds good.
yeah. So the main purpose of what you're doing here, it's actually used in 2 ways. So um, the first way is during the course of development, when you want to implement new features, you write the tests first. So you write the tests for the new features you're adding, and they will initially fail. And then you implement the code changes, and you'll know you're done when you pass all the tests that you wrote. So that's called test-driven development. The second use of the tests, though, is when you have stuff working and you write a bunch of tests, then later on, if you change the code, you can periodically rerun all your unit tests. And typically that's done every night. All of the unit tests get rerun. And the first thing you do in the morning is you take a look at what actually passed and what actually failed in all the unit tests. That's called regression testing because you're making continuous changes to the code base, and some of the changes you made might have actually broken stuff that worked before. And that's a quick way of finding out whether you accidentally broke something that you weren't expecting. So I'm really more looking for, at this point, regression testing kinds of unit tests where you can just verify that you haven't broken anything when you make a change to the code. And so your assertion should basically assume that the code works correctly and just, check obvious things about what it's doing. Okay.
Pretty straightforward. Thank you.
Yep, my pleasure. And then I see some more comments. So that's really useful. Good. I'm glad. And Eric says it's important to point out that your methods should start with the word test or they will not run. Yes. Thank you. And anything else? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording then, and I'm going to make sure that this is available for us. And I'll also put it up in the core shell. Stop sharing, stop recording.